Hey, Victor. All right, so here is my walkthrough of my presentation. I have my timer up, so we're going to keep it, uh, under 8 minutes. So share screen. All right. So today we're talking about investing in Los Angeles real estate. I had to get my timer going. And we're going to look at the top 5 zip codes. So first, the business case. There's a real estate investment group, and they want to know the top 5 best zip codes in Los Angeles to invest in. They are looking to invest in single-family homes, and they want the highest returns with the least amount of risk. And the strategy is buy and hold. So we're going to be looking at 5-year projections, and the plan with buy and hold is to rent in the meantime. We'll discuss that more as we go along. So the data, here are all the zip codes. There were 100 total, and we'll get into that. This slide should probably be first. Okay, so the data are from Zillow, and they are median home sale prices. And they actually, Zillow's data calculates the median from the median of the 33rd to 67th percentile for each zip code. Like I said, there were 100 zip codes total. And I got the most recent data that were available when I ran this analysis. So it went from January 31st, 1996 to July 31st, 2020. And we saw some cool trends as well. And there were just under 30,000 data points. Let me go back to this image. I realize now I should switch the order of these. So I just want to talk about some trends really fast. We could see the 08 housing bubble here that crashed in 08, 09. There was a recession. It started to pick up again in 2012. And then we've seen a lot of growth, basically nationwide, but we can see it through all the zip codes here in LA, some more than others. And then what happened in 2019 is that for the first time since like back in 2012, growth really slowed in 2019, and there was a housing bubble that was being predicted. Surprisingly enough, though, in 2020, we can see there's still been a good amount of growth, just with things leveling out. I think this may have had to do with, see how it was still pretty high until this point, which this may be going into about July, like May, July. And this could have had to have done with like stimulus wearing off. But we'll talk about that more when we get to it. So we talked about this. Now methods. So I used stats model, Ceramax time series model. And I use the Ceramax to account for seasonality. I didn't use the X portion, but that's optional in this model. So we'll keep going with that. And I did 5-year projections, and I calculated the return on investment with those 5-year projections. So basically, the equation for return on investment is profit divided by investment times 100 to get the percent. So I took the 5-year forecasted value using the model, and then I subtracted the current value. So these again are like median home sale values. And so that's how I calculated the profit. So if someone were to buy a home now at the current median value, and then sell in 5 years based off of the projected value, that would be the profit, and then divided by the investment, which is the current value, times 100. So that's how we did ROI. And then I did take into account risk too. So for example, if a zip code came out in the top 5, but it had a lot of variability, I removed it. So we'll see that as we go. So results. Here were the top 10 zip codes. So as you can see here, this first one, I mean, look at, this is ROI. This is just out of control variation. Like, what is that? So I removed these two. These are in the top 10. And then I focused on these 5 here. And you'll see as we zoom in, the error bars here will widen up. These are the 95% confidence intervals. So here are the top 5, with the top one around 200% projected return on investment. This one just under. I'll show you the table for these in a second, but all around 165 to 200% return on investment with the least amount of variability within these top ones. We can talk about these ones too, but we're going to focus on these top 5 selected here for now. And so these zip codes are Mar Vista, Toluca Lake, and parts of Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Valley Village, and Chinatown, downtown LA. There was a trend in all of these top 5 zip codes, which we will talk about in a second. So here are the zip codes again, and you can see what I was saying here, how real estate did slow down in 2019. There's been a bubble predicted, for a little while now that it's supposed to happen over the next couple of years, but we can see surprisingly in 2020 it's continued to go up. But again, without that extra stimulus happening yet, I mean, this is a little uncertain right now. There could still be a bubble, but we've seen there's a lot of growth up until 2019, and then surprisingly in 2020 we've still had steady growth in the housing markets. I could talk more about that, but the time will go really over if I do. All right, so here are our top 5. I think I'm already getting near time. I can record it again to make it shorter if I need to. But yeah, so here are top 5, like I was talking about before. And so there was a trend in our top 5, and there was the one that I removed before. Remember the one with the really wide error bars that came out as number 1? So the thing what that had in common, and then these top 4 here, so the original top 5, they're all around like $1 to $2 million homes that are like 3 bedrooms, couple thousand square feet, all in the $1 to $2 million range. And they all, these are areas of LA where they're still nice, but they're not the most prime locations. So in the most prime locations, real estate is just out of control. Well, that's very relative, high prices. But in these neighborhoods, they're all, they're nicer areas. They're not like the main areas, but they're still nice. And so people are able to get relatively moderately priced homes. This is considered like affordable, but still nice here in LA. So anyway, so that's what the top 5 had in common. And then, so this was technically 6, but then when I removed the high risk one, this became the high variability one, this became number 5. And so this one is different than the other ones. This one, the median, and there goes my 8-minute timer. I'm just going to keep going. So this one's the median value is lower than the other ones, which we can see. And then we look at profit here. And I do have the errors for the 5-year projected value and profit. Those are in the README and also in the notebook, but here I just want to focus on these metrics. And then we can see return on investment for these ones, close to 200, just a little bit lower. And even with these, it's all really good. And then if we look here, this one was like the least amount of risk. The ROI was close to 200, and the minimum was the least out of all, basically out of all of the zip codes that came out in the top 10, which is really good because we're looking at ROI first. So I looked at the top 10. So we're going to take a closer look at this one. This is Toluca Lake, and we'll look at the map later. I have it in the appendix actually. But this is Toluca Lake. It's a cute area. It's kind of near Burbank. It's near Universal Studios, Warner Brothers, all of that. So, but yeah, it's a great little area. And so we can see our dynamic 5-year forecast here, from July 31st of 2020 through July 21st of 2025. So again, it's projected to go straight up. This isn't really taking into consideration a potential housing market crash. So we'll see. And this is an example of a home in Toluca Lake, again in the $1 to $2 million range. And most of them are around 3 bedrooms. Some are 2. This one's 4, so this one is a little bit bigger. It's a little over 2,000 square feet. But this is, maybe a little bit bigger, but like standard for the neighborhoods that came out in the top 5, except a one that was at Chinatown in downtown LA. Those houses are priced lower, and there are also a lot fewer for sale in that neighborhood. So recommendations. All right, so yes, I recommend investing in the top 5 zip codes. The one with the greatest return and the least amount of risk was Toluca Lake, which we just talked about. Something to take into consideration is a potential housing bubble. I go into a lot more depth on this in the conclusion of my notebook. So it can be read about there. And then also rental markets. So rental markets play a big factor in 2 ways. So one is that in these areas, so all of them except for Chinatown had similar pricing as far as home sale prices go, or home value prices go. And since the strategy is buy and hold, we're going to be renting. So what's important as far as the rental markets go is to do an analysis to look at rental prices, because if home prices are going to be the same in most of these zip codes, but let's say rental prices are higher in one zip code than another, it would be better to invest in the one with the higher rent to home price ratio, because rent will be covering the mortgage over the 5 years. So more higher rent to home cost ratio is going to result in a greater return on investment. And then another thing to consider is a housing bubble. So if there is a housing bubble, in the housing bubble of 08 and the recession of 09, which was different than now, again, for reasons I won't discuss because it would take a long time. But the rental markets stayed relatively strong during that time, even though the housing markets fell, the housing prices fell, again, for reasons that would take a lot longer to discuss than we have now. And so then, so the rental market stayed pretty stable during that time. So I would also want to look at the rental markets, and I'll go into this in further recommendations, but look at where the rental markets are considered the strongest out of all the zip codes. So they're the steadiest, because that would ensure consistent rental income. So there's not as much of a liability if there is a housing bubble. Cool. So for future work, that leads us into future work, rental market analysis. I'd like to look at the trends over through the 08 housing bubble into 09 through 2012, and just see which of those zip codes had the steadiest rental markets. And then also just looking during the time of the 2020 pandemic, which zip codes have had the most stable. And again, I mean, there were eviction bans, and maybe nicer areas aren't as affected because it's been, well, anyway, this is a whole nother conversation. But I would like to look at patterns during that time as well. So thank you. Yay. I think I definitely went over time there. But yeah, I also made an appendix. So I'll just flip through this with the top 10, all the metrics, so they could see in the top 5 zip codes. I went through each one of the top 5s in a little more detail with boundary maps, metrics, and forecasts. So we've got Mar Vista and Toluca Lake in all the details here, the boundary map. So we can see Toluca Lake is near Warner Brothers Studios. So this is an industry that's been affected by the pandemic. I believe a lot of them are starting to go back to work now, but some are still being laid off. So it would be interested to see if this is affected. But again, this is a bit of a nice area. And with this pandemic, it tends to be kind of like mid-income to lower, not in all cases, but that are affected with unemployment. So I don't know, and we'll see if there's going to be another stimulus package and what's happening. All of those things will play a role. And it was the first stimulus package that really helped keep the economy and rental markets strong so far. and just a lot of the protections that were put in place. So we'll see how that all goes. But Sherman Oaks, Valley Village, which this is a private video, so this is my neighborhood, so I was very excited to see this on there. Yeah, and then the Chinatown, downtown LA, which is lower price than the other top 5, different neighborhood type. Not as many homes for sale here either. But again, good return on investment. So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to presenting live soon.